Hi everyone, welcome to Java Techie. In this tutorial, we'll discuss how to handle fault tolerance in Spring Batch. You can consider this is one of the most commonly asked interview question for experienced developer. Before I explain further, I am assuming that you guys have basic understanding of Spring Batch. If not, you can check out my YouTube tutorial where I already explain what is Spring Batch and its components and internal architecture of each and every component of Spring Batch with detailed example. No worries, I will share this link in video description so that you guys can refer it. Okay, cool. As we know, when we want to process bulk data, we usually choose this Spring Batch processing to make that process faster. And if you can remember, in our last example, we tried to move data from CSV file to database using this Spring Batch concept. But this flow looks good. Did you ever try to think about any failure scenario here? Let me walk you through one example. Let's assume this is the file user sent to process through the Spring Batch. But if you observe user passing few wrong input here, where gender is null and age field should be integer, but here it is some alphanumeric value, right? Now, when the Spring Batch will process this file, he found invalid input. So here is the question. Now, will the Spring Batch process other rows by skipping the error one? I mean, Spring Batch will skip only the row 1 and it will process the other row? The answer is no. If any exception occurs while processing the data, then Spring Batch simply roll back it. He won't process further, which is completely a wrong designing or you can say a wrong implementation, isn't it? If error occurs in a single row, then we should not truncate other row. Rather, we need to skip only that row which is having the invalid data or corrupted data and rest other we want to process. So in above example, we have corrupted data in row 1. So we need to tell to the Spring Batch, please keep the error row which is 1 and process other data from row 2 to 15. And also we want to notify to the user which row is the corrupted in a file and what is the issue with that inputs, because I don't want to block the entire flow for few corrupted value. It might impact my business, right? Now, how can you do that? That is what the major challenging task in Spring Batch. So to make our job easier, Spring Batch introduced a mechanism called skip policy to handle fault tolerance in Spring Batch processing, where you have a control in your batch processing so that you can tell to the Spring Batch which exception need to be skipped and what need to be unskipped while processing large volume of data. How cool is this, isn't it? So let's quickly demonstrate this use case in action. We'll see the default behavior without implementing the skip. Then we'll implement the skip policy and we'll try to understand it more. Okay. So without any further delay, let's get started. So if you can remember, this is the same piece of code we tried in our Spring Batch example. Okay. And if you can observe here, we have something called customer.csv file. This CSV input, I want to populate in my DB using this batch processing. And as you know, there is a three processor or three key component in Spring Batch. One is the reader who will read this source, or you can say who will read this CSV file, and there will be a processor who will filter out the particular customer object whose age is greater than 18, and there is a writer who will write the input to the DB. Okay, these are the three key component: reader, processor and writer. So the same example we will try without having any error scenario. I mean, we'll try with the happy scenario first, where my file does not have any corrupted data. Okay, so first let me run this example, then we'll see this happy scenario, then we'll try one by one to make it failure and we'll try to find out the solution. Okay, so first let me run this example. So if you observe, application started on port 9191 and we have written one controller, right? Go to the controller class. From the controller we are invoking the job using this job launcher. So let me hit this endpoint. Okay, so meanwhile let me go to the run. I will clear the console. I will just execute this URL. So let's run it. Can you see here? It took 1092 millisecond and status is 200. And if you will observe in the console, it fired the insert statement. It means the reader read the CSV file and my processor filter out all the customer whose age is greater than 18. That is what the logic we have here, right? Processor will filter out the customer object whose age is 18. Then my writer will write those input to the DB. And here you can see the insert statement, right? Now if you go and verify in your DB, you can find few inbuilt table generated by this Spring Batch. So let me go to my DB here. Then can you see here batch job execution context, and these are the table and these are the customer info table, right? Already I explained before role of each and every table. So I will share my Spring Batch video link in description, so you guys can check that out. Okay, I don't want to deep dive further about each and every table. My intention here to explain you about the failure scenario and how you can handle it. So let me show you the customer info. Let me remove this, select star from this table and just run it. Can you see here the number of record? We have 9 record. I guess we have the 15 row in our CSV file. Out of 15, there are 8 row whose age is greater than 18, right? This is 14, so this is less than. So we found 18. I mean, this processor is able to filter the correct record. Okay, so can you see here? This is what all the record got inserted. Now these are the two major table to check the batch job execution status. So let me run it. Can you see here the ID of your job, job instance ID and status is completed. There is exit code is completed. There is no exception. Okay, you can see here this exit message field is blank. Now there is another important table. This is what batch step execution. So just run it. You can see here, let me make this up, just do this. Can you see here step execution ID is 1, version is 6, and this is the same step name what we configured in our batch config file, and the execution ID is same here. That is what we verified before, right? And this is what the start time, and if you observe the status is completed, commit count is 4, and can you see here the read count is 15. It read all the 15 row from my CSV file. Then the write count should be 9 here, right? Because you can see the 9 record has been written to my DB, and there is no skip count, there is no write skip count, and there is 0 rollback because there is no failure. And you can see here the exit code is complete and there is no failure. Okay, now you can minimize this. So this is what the key table you can refer when you want to check your job status. Okay, so this is will give you about the step execution information. This will give about the job execution information. So we are good here because you tried the happy scenario. Now what we will do, go to your file forcefully. I want to make one row as a corrupted value, or I will give some invalid value. Let's say this age field should be integer and I am giving some alphanumeric value. Okay, this is what some random value I am giving. Now, as per the default behavior of Spring Batch, we'll just verify if the row 1 is having some issue, will it process all other rows or not. Okay, so based on that, we'll verify how it behave by default. Then we'll try to find out the solution for it using this keep policy. So this is what the invalid input I added in the row 1. Now let's see the default behavior of it. So for that, what I'll do, I will just delete the table. Like I'll just delete all the information from the customer table. So just delete it, because I could verify from these two table, batch job execution and batch step execution. But I just also want to show you really it is not inserting anything if it found some error in the code. Okay, so let me rerun the code. So it is up and running. So let me go to the Postman. Let me clear the console first. Go to the Postman and I will send the request. Now the status is 200. Now let's go and check here. Can you see the error message in the console? We'll verify what is the error message. Okay. So the error message is java.lang.number format exception for the input string this. That is what the input we are giving. I mean, when request went to this processor, it is trying to do the integer.parseInt of customer.getAge, and we are giving the age field as this. Okay. So here this string cannot be converted to the integer. So that is the reason we are getting number format exception. Okay. So it means, can you see any insert statement here? No, not a single record will be inserted. We found the error or corrupted data in row 1, right? This is what the corrupted data. But because of this single row, it is not continuing processing other row as well. So that is what something the wrong designing, right? Now let's verify in the DB first. So I'll just verify the customer table. It should empty because there is no insert statement fired from the code. Now if you'll check the batch job execution table, you will get the status as a failed here. Okay, and you will get the more information in this table, step execution. This is what the actual step being executed. When I say step, it contains your reader, writer and processor. So always you will get error in between these three components. Either the error can be a part of reader or processor or writer. Okay, so just execute this step execution table. Now if you observe, the step execution id is 2, the name is same, job execution id is what is that, 2, right? Then start time, end time, can you see here the status is failed, commit count is 0, and if you observe here, write count also 0, and skip count 0, write skip count 0, and process skip count as well 0. And the, can you see here the rollback count, that is what the important. Okay, so rollback count 1. So it means if it found some exception, simply it rolled back it. Okay, rather than process it further, Spring Batch simply roll back the entire flow. Can you see here the status is failed, and this is what the error. What error we are getting? Number format exception. Let me copy this somewhere. Okay, let me go to the Sublime. I will paste it. The error is java.lang.number format exception for input string this. Now, how we can tell to the Spring Batch, hey, if you are finding any number format exception in the code while reading, writing or processing, please skip that error and continue processing other row of my file. So that is where this skip policy will help. So you need to specify the exception which you want to skip as part of your batch processing flow. How we can do that? Simply go to the config class. This is what the config, right? Spring Batch config. If you remember, as part of the step, we are giving the reader, processor and writer, and we found the error in the processor, right? Now here we need to tell the Spring Batch to handle fault tolerant, and then if you found the exception limit more than 2 times, 3 times or 5 times, but anyway, let me give some big number. I don't care about the skip limit. Which exception you want to skip, you can specify that exception. If you are finding the number format exception dot class, then skip that specific row and process further. Okay, there can be a guarantee you can get any kind of exception. It can be a runtime exception, right? So it's good practice, like it's not good practice as for your requirement. You can keep it as a exception dot class, or you can keep it as a runtime dot class. Okay, runtime exception dot class. Any exception which you want to skip, just specify here. That is what the method tells. Okay, so as of now I will just specify the number format exception. And let's say if you are getting some illegal argument exception and you don't want to skip that, you want to roll back over there, so you can simply specify no skip. If you are getting illegal argument, let me type it properly, illegal argument exception, then don't skip it. Okay, only skip if you are finding the number format exception. You can specify the skip and no skip as well. For now, this is not my intention to explain. You can give a try by doing some code modification to trigger some forcefully exception, other exception, and you can verify both skip and non-skip. Okay, so for now we'll go with the skip. So we tell to the Spring Batch, if you are finding any number format exception, then simply skip that row rather than roll back it and process further row. Okay, now let's see this behavior whether real it is working or not. Let me run this. So it started again on 9191. Now let me clear the console. Let me verify we should not have any entry here. Okay, fine. Now let me just hit the endpoint. Now if you'll go and check in your, let me verify in the DB first. The record got inserted. How many record? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 record, because one record whose age is greater than 18 having the invalid input, right? Now if you will verify in your console, can you see here the insert statement here? Okay, I mean we already verified the record is there in the DB. There is no sense to verify this insert statement, but to just give a confirmation that really this reader, processor and writer is working, I just demonstrate this console part. Okay, now again if we will go and check the batch execution, ID will be 3, status is directly completed. Now if we will verify the this step execution table, you will find something. The status is completed, commit count is 4, read count is 15, write count is 8 because one is having issue. And the main important thing here, the status is completed and there is no error. Process skip count is 1 because it only skip the one row. Okay, because at the time of processor only we are getting the error, right? So this processor component skip the one row, that is what it's showing, but it is not showing the existing or exit message, right? Why? There is a error. If you could find the status as a failed, then you can see the message, error message here, but since our status is completed, we won't get any message here. We need to manually inform to the user what is the error or where exactly the error occurs or which row is having the issue. All those information you can gather and you can return back to the user. So that I will show you as part of the listener. I will cover that, don't worry. So we are good here, right? Whatever the configuration we have added about the skip policy is working as expected. So always you need to define the skip policy while building the step object. Okay, before reader, processor, writer, you need to define the fault tolerant, then you can specify the skip. And the purpose of this particular method, skip limit, you can tell to the Spring Batch, hey, if you found the exception in a file one time, then just skip this. Or if you are finding, let's say you want to validate for 2 times, right? If that error occurs 2 times, then skip it. Okay, anyway, there is some bug in this particular skip limit method. If you specify the lower number, you will get the exception. So I found over the Stack Overflow, even I didn't find the solution for it. So you can define the large number to avoid this skip limit, and this skip is the main key to skip the exception what you will specify here. Now you might ask, hey, this is the only way we can configure the skip limit and skip, or can I write my own custom policy? Yes, you can write your own custom skip policy. How we can do that? For that, you need to create a class by extending or by implementing from skip policy interface. I will show you that. Let me create a class from the scratch. I will create a Java class. I will give a name something like any exception skip policy. Okay. Fine. This is what the class I created. I need to implement it from skip policy interface. Okay. Now you just need to override a method should skip. Just override it. Fine. In this method, if you observe here, you have the argument called throwable and int I. So this int I, you can specify your skip limit count, and this is what the you can validate if the exception you are getting is instance of a specific exception or not. This kind of validation you can do that. For example, we are getting number format exception, right? I want to tell to the Spring Batch I am creating my custom skip policy where the if the throwable is instance of number format exception, then simply return true. It means apply the skip. Okay, and if you want, you can set the skip limit. Let's say you want to set for 2, I equal to 2. You can also do that, or you can define the count globally and you can map here. But for now, let's not focus more on the skip limit. We'll focus on the skip. Okay, so here if you want you can log it, but it's not a good place to keep your logging info as part of this skip policy. I will show you how we can identify whether the error is there in reader, writer or processor, and what is the error, how we can find out, and how we can tell to the user using this listener concept. So let me complete this skip policy, then we'll move to the next step about the listener. Okay, so you need to create a class, then implements from the skip policy, override the should skip method, and here you can validate whether the exception is being raised is instance of the number format exception, then simply return true. I mean, if it is a true, I want to apply the skip. Okay, so that is what you can again configure in your Spring Batch config file. But since this is the class we created, I need to create a bean of it, right? So I will create the bean here. Let's say public, it will return the skip policy. Skip policy. Now it will return the implementation class which we created. Return new exception skip policy. Okay, just annotate here at the red bean. Now we don't want to use the default skip algorithm. We want to provide my custom skip policy. So simply just specify here dot skip policy and give your bean, which is skip policy, right? This is what bean we created. The same bean, just pass here. Now let me run this. But before that, already the record is there, right? So what I will do, I'll just delete the record. Okay, just delete it. Now let me run it. I need to start the server. So it is started on port 9191. Go to the postman and let me clear the console first. Then simply hit the endpoint. Can you see here the insert statement? And if you verify in your DB, just run the select star from the table, you can see the 8 record. And if you will just verify the batch step execution table, the status should be completed without any failure. I mean, there is a two way. Either you can define the default method, which is the method chaining, you can say, of the skip and no skip limit. Otherwise, just create your own skip policy class. Okay, so this is just a demo class I created, exception skip policy. You can make it more meaningful by adding the additional logic for the skip limit and different kind of exception validation. Let's say you are not getting only the number format exception, right? So you can add multiple condition. If throwable dot instance of number format exception, then do this, or you can also validate for illegal argument exception or any kind of application specific exception. You can just validate and you can do some your operation. You can either update the step execution object to make the status has failed and populate the proper error message. You can do a number of steps here, okay, since you have the object with you. Now this is what the another way to define the skip policy. But this is fine. Now if you observe, all the 8 record got inserted in the table. This is what, right? If you observe, all the 8 record got inserted in the table. But since there is a failure in a one row, that particular row is skipped because we define our skip policy. But how user will know there is a error or there is a corrupted data in a file? Because all the 8 is got populated and the status is succeed, right? If you observe here, the status is completed, there is no failure status. How user will know whether a specific row or a specific object is being skipped or n number of object is being skipped while processing the batch file? We need to tell to the user, hey, these are the row, you are having some error or you are having some corrupted value, please correct them and re-upload the file. How you can tell to the end user? There is a listener class who will always listen to your item reader, writer and processor to identify where is the error occurs and what is the error occurs. Okay, so for that, to tell to the or to notify to the end user, you need to write a listener class to listen to the item process reader, writer and processor component. Okay, so we need to write a listener class to track the error message where exactly the error occurs in a file. Okay, so I'll just create a new package. Let's say the package name is listener. Okay, okay, I created a class. Let me delete this. I need to create a package, new package. Okay, now here I will create a class. Let's say Java class. I'll create a name something like step skip listener. Okay, any name you can give. Okay, since I want to monitor my step flow, I mean reader, writer, processor, I just name it step skip listener. Okay, so just create this class, then simply you need to implement it from skip listener. Okay, there is a class called skip, there is an interface called skip listener. T is the object which will getting flow from reader to writer, and S is the number. Okay, so you can define the object as a customer, and second argument is number, Java lang number. Okay, now it will force you to override three method. So if you read the method name, let me override it. The method name itself self-explanatory, you can easily identify. So can you see here, there is a method on skip in read while doing the item reader. Okay, so this will execute as part of item reader. I mean this method will keep monitor your item reader class, item reader. Okay, and on skip in write, this will be monitor your item writer. Okay, now this method is the process, right? On skip in process, this is all about item processor. Okay, so there are three methods. One will execute or one will listen to the read event, one will listen to the write event, and one will listen to the process event. I mean, if you can implement this custom listener, you can at least easily identify whether the error is there in reader or writer or processor. Simply log them and find out what is the error. That's it. That is enough to return back to the end user to identify which row is having the issue. Okay, so what you can do, let me add a log statement. I mean, rather than adding a log statement, you can create a separate error or failure entity to populate those information. But anyway, it's fine, I can keep in a log also. Okay, being a developer, I can check the log and I can easily identify which row is having the issue. Okay, if you want to return the JSON response, create a separate entity and just add the error value, row number, or what is the object, or what exactly field is causing the issue. Okay, so we are good with the logger as well. So just add a logger, logger equal to logger factory dot get logger of, give the class name step skip listener dot class. Fine. So on skip in read, you can just add something, either you can add SOPLN, but that is not a good practice. Just add logger dot info. Okay, just specify something like a failure on read. And what is the error? Simply you can pass throwable dot get message. Okay, so one more thing, rather than, if you don't want to add a log, simply there is some class called step execution context or something like that. Let me check. Step execution. Okay, this is Java's bash runtime, this one. If you open this class, you can find your this, right? What is the status of your job, read count, write count. So you can inject this step execution object and you can create the object of it, and you can set all the value here. This is simple, right? So get the step execution object, then just populate the field, like what is that, rollback count, commit count, read count. I mean, if you want to customize this table, okay. If not, you can create your own entity class, or you can create your own class so that all the required value you can populate to the DB. Otherwise, you can add the logger, which is the easiest way to track the error in a bash flow. Okay, so I will do this. I don't want to concat here, otherwise there is no sense to use this SL4J. Okay, so I will copy this again. I'll just add here a failure on write. I'll add two parameter. Okay, first one is the item. Okay, this should not be number, right? Just give me a second. Let me use this number as well. Okay, fine. First argument is the error message, and second I will pass as a number will, or I will rename it to the item. Okay, so at least you can get the valid count. So these are the two field we are giving. Okay, now the main, because this is what the processor we are getting the error in our case, right? So I will just add, uh, I'll copy this logger.info, then you can add some valid message here. Okay, what is the item? I mean, I just need to refactor it correctly. I mean, which is the object is causing the issue. So I will just get the object here. I mean, object, when I say object, it is nothing, your entire row of your CSV. Okay, if you'll go and check in your CSV, each row is one object in your DB, right? So that is what I just want to track here. Go to the listener. So I just want to track the object. So I'll just use new object mapper, because I just want to display as a JSON. Okay, dot write value as a string, give the customer object, it will throw the exception and it will cry simply sneaky throw. This is something came from the Lombok. Either rather than throws it from your method, you can annotate at the rate sneaky throws. Okay, at the rate sneaky throws is enough to define. Okay, rather than throw it from your method. So that is fine. Now what I need to do, I will add some valid message here. This item was skipped due to the exception, due to the exception, add a space and give the exception message. Okay, I mean, again, I no need to do this, I can handle using this, means I no need to concat it actually. So what I can do now, I will simply add the throwable dot get message. Fine, let me add a enter here. So this is what the listener we created. We have added the read, write and process, and we log in each method to identify whether the error is there in read, write or process. In our case, we'll get the error in this in process method. So I'm going to track them with what is the object is causing the issue and what is the error message. Why it is crying, what I will do, more argument provided, 2 than placeholder specified 1. Okay, so I believe we need to do something like this. You can remove this. Item is this, then was skipped due to the exception, or no, not like that. I will just add it here. Anyway, this argument is nothing, the dynamic value we are giving, right? So I can add here. Fine. So okay, this we need to remove. This is the second argument. Fine. Item, then this is the value, was skipped due to the exception. What is the exception message? Cool, then we are created the listener class. Now we need to register this listener class as part of the step execution. So just go to the config and simply add this bin, which is the skip listener. What I'll do, I'll just create a method public. Okay, then I'll just define skip listener is the class skip listener. I will simply create the object of return new step skip listener. That is what we created, right? Simply annotate here at the rate bin Now just call this bean before you call the skip policy dot listener. I mean, you need to register it. Okay, that is what the skip policy, sorry, skip listener. Okay, fine. So here we are handling the skip policy and we are notifying to the user by tracking the message or failure in the log. Okay, so now let me rerun the code, but before that it's fine. I can, it's not required to delete from the DB. Anyway, you have all the record, so we can only verify whether the insert statement is getting fired or not. Because since the record is already there in DB, Spring Batch is smart enough. He will only fire the select to check whether that row is present or not. If it is present, he will not re-execute that. Okay, rather he will skip that simply. So that is what one more use case I will show you once I will cover this listener part. Let me rerun the code. So it started on port 9191. Now let me clear the console. Simply I will go to the postman, then I will simply send the request. Okay. Now if you observe, there is no insert statement. Okay. Now I just want to verify the listener log here. See here, this is what the log we added, right? This is what the timestamp when it executed, and which row is having the issue. This is the row, the item whose ID equal to 1, first name is DUD, last name is ISHK, email is this, gender is male, country Ukraine, all the field. Okay, age is this, was skipped. Can you see here? Let me zoom this further. This particular row was skipped due to the exception for input string this value. Now this is enough to understand by someone what is the mistake in a file. Okay, because already you are getting the row, right? This row number you can consider. The error is there in the ID 1, and what is the error? You can get it from the was skipped due to the exception for input string. This is the string. Now user, what user will do, he will simply copy the value which is giving the error. He will simply go to the file, project, go to the customer.csv file. I can open in a table format, and he can simply filter here, right? I mean, I don't know whether you can filter in this format or not. Otherwise, you can go to the text format. And let's say if that file is having 100 row, right? It's not quite easy to go line by line and understand. Since we have the 15 row and we forcefully did the mistake, we know there is error in the row 1. But what user will do typically, he will simply do the filter with the value. And he found, okay, this guy is crying, right? Because this particular row is having the wrong input value. Now what user will do? Simply he will just give the Boolean number. He understand this should be integer field. He will give something like 34. Okay. Now that is enough. Now if you observe, user understand the mistake and he modified it. Now he need to rerun the application. I mean, he need to rerun the job to insert this particular row as well in the DB, because single row skip can cause the business impact, isn't it? So what user will do, he just modified the value. Now he need to re-import this particular job again. So once he will do the re-import, since all the 8 record is there in my DB whose age is greater than 18, Spring Batch will only insert a single row. He won't look back to the other row to reinsert them again. That is what this Spring Batch is smart enough. So if any failure occurs in a file, and if you skipped it, and if user will modify it further, and if you want to rerun your job, it will only insert those error row, or which is fixed row. It won't rerun the entire file again. That is what another use case of Spring Batch. So this is the expected question from the interviewer, right? Let's say he will ask you, you have a 10 row in your file, 8 9, okay, 7 8 9 is having issue, and you ran the job and you found there is issue on 7 8 9 and you fixed it. Now if you will rerun your job again, will it scan all other row from 1 to 10, or it will just insert 7 8 9? So the answer is it will only insert the 7 8 9 if the value is not corrupted. Okay, so let me rerun the code. I will show you directly. So it started. Cool. Now let's go to the Postman. Before that, let me clear this console, and I just want to show you in the DV we have only 8 record, not 9. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, now the customer ID 1 is not here. User just modified that, and you want to rerun the job. Simply hit the endpoint. Now if you go and check in your console, you will find only a single insert statement. Okay, you'll find a single insert statement, and there will be no log tracked for reader writer processor what we written in our listener class. Can you see anything here? No. If there is no error in a reader writer processor, that listener won't log anything. If there is a error, then only that listener will help you to identify what is the error and which row is causing the issue and what is the error message. Now if you'll verify in your DV, ID1 is inserted, right? The count is 9. And again, there is no sense to evaluate the step execution or job execution. But if you observe, it just added the entry. I mean, I just want to convince you, if you are running a file with 1000 row, and if there is a failure in 200 row in a file, it will persist all the 800 row to the DV, and when you will correct them or when you will fix the failure in each 200 row, and when you will rerun the file to continue your job, it will again insert only those 200 row to the DV. It won't scan again the 1000 row. Okay, that is what one more advantages in Spring Batch. Spring Batch is smart enough to understand that where exactly he skipped and what need to be continued. Yeah, so I believe you got the complete picture about how to handle the fault tolerance in Spring Batch and how you can notify to the end user about the failure with the corresponding message. Okay, so do let me know in a comment section if you guys have any doubts. That's all about this particular video, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Meet you soon with a new concept.